I've never told anyone this because I'm very, very sensitive about what I share about my son because it's his life to share. My grandfather was born in 1901. He could not read. He faced odds that are unimaginable. He's a sharecropper. He had to leave school in the second grade. And he was as elegant as any person who's ever walked into a palace and walked every day of his life with dignity. So for me, the ups and downs that I experienced, and I don't mean this as an all shucks self-deprecating, I look at that and I'm like, wait, this is nothing.
I want to know how you feel that the book will help kids understand the importance of where they come from and their neighborhoods and their homes and the people they choose to surround themselves with.
For me, expanding the conversation from tears to fear, which is a hard thing because you don't want to be afraid. You don't want your child to be afraid, but it's all natural for us to experience, to be afraid of something. And so for me, the curious adventures of this kid talks about how do you ease fears, curiosity. Because if you can become curious about something, you may ask a question that opens up dialogue or opens up this new world.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Do Tell Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Nina Westbrook. And today you're in for a real treat because I get to have a really cool conversation with Tamron Hall, whom recently, well, not that recently, I don't know, maybe a year ago, I got to go visit her on her show in New York, which is a really fun experience. So today she's coming to join us on the podcast. I feel like in one life, I kind of imagine potentially being a television show host. And after my experiences on shows like Tamron Hall, I realized that it was very different than what I actually thought in my brain. And I will say I have such a respect for television hosts and all that they have to kind of analyze and understand and learn, all while pretending like they already know everything that's happening. Things come at you so quickly. I feel like even the preparation for going on that show, for those of you who've never been on a show like that, I probably had hours-long conversations. I was giving many different topics and things that I would potentially discuss. And then once I was actually on there, like all of that went right out of my head. And there's a bunch of people looking at you, lots of lights, lots of cameras. And, you just end up winging it in the end. And I mean, I think it turned out well, but it's kind of fun to have her join me in my space today. It's been very cozy and comfy, though she's going to be joining us virtually. For those of you who maybe don't watch television, I'm going to do a quick intro as to who Tamron is. She's here to share more about her book, her new book coming out. Her name is Tamron Hall. She's an Emmy Award-winning journalist, talk show host, and author who has built a career on asking the tough questions and telling the stories that matter. From making history as the first Black woman to co-anchor Today to launching the Tamron Hall Show, she's created a space where real conversation thrives, which we love real conversation. But Tamron's impact goes beyond television. She's now adding children's book author to the list with Harlem Honey, The Adventures of a Curious Kid, a story that explores identity, belonging, and the idea that home isn't just a place, it's something we carry with us. She's a mother and someone who knows what it means to embrace the unknown while staying true to herself. Today, we're getting into all of it, finding your people, staying true to yourself, and embracing the twists and turns that come with every new chapter. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I just want you to know I'm so appreciative that you are here with us. I know you've got your schedule and everything is important. And so it really means a lot to us that you're joining us today.
I feel the same. I mean, I appreciate you coming in to talk with my show. We have to, as busy as we are, make time, I feel, to have the conversations that can be impactful, that can
Mm-hmm.
resonate, that connect us to our fans, if you will, but to our family members and to other people who may not even know us personally, but they will hear this conversation or the conversation we had on my show and feel seen and feel that, they're not in it alone.
Exactly. And I think that what's really important also is before we can even jump into the book, I had the most amazing experience with your producers on your
Oh,
show. I know I got to chat with them prior to going on, and they were so kind, and it was just such a lovely experience. So
that means the
just
world
wanted to
to
note
me.
that.
And I appreciate that, especially because when I launched into this talk show, I'd been a journalist for 30 years. For lack of a better description, you're the worker bee, right? The network is
Hmm.
the name. And then when we launched this show, I had just had my son. I was so busy focused on the content and what, the show would look like and what we would be talking about. And it was a big wake up call, I think maybe a month into the show, that, as Jay-Z says, I'm a businessman. I mean, it was like, it was a business and I was no longer, the worker bee at a network. My name was on the show. And so for me, it's like the scene, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Casino, when Robert De Niro's character walks through and he's like, there are not enough blueberries in this muffin. Like he opens up the muffin because even the number of blueberries in the muffin mattered. And so for me, everything matters. That's a philosophy I carry in my life that is both
Hmm.
professional and personal. And so when I hear my team being celebrated by a guest like yourself, it's like a proud parent because it
Hmm.
really, when they say things start at the top, I believe that. And I try to cultivate an environment of appreciation of time, of words, of energy. And so that means the world to me.
Yep, and you're so true. It starts at the top.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of,
Mhm.
obviously you're a wealth of knowledge and you've had so much experience in the industry, and I want to start by saying you have been a trailblazer and you've been through and experienced the many ups and downs in the industry. And I feel like you've done it with grace and you've done it successfully and wonderfully. And I feel like I want to know and understand a little bit more about how you're able to kind of trust yourself and how to navigate these difficult times in an industry where you're constantly having to reinvent yourself when the rules are often changing and you've been able to do it so beautifully.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. For me, I'll tell you, when I launched the show, I was at a dinner party, and one of those moments where you're thinking, like, did they really mean to invite me? Because of the kind of crowd that was there. I was like, "Wait, okay, well, thank you, I appreciate it." So I'm in this room, and a very, very, very successful journalist came over, and she said to me, "Oh gosh, it's going to be hard. Oh boy." And she didn't mean to make it a negative. She was expressing just, some of the sentiments that a lot of people had to me,
Mhm,
which was, "Oh
mhm,
boy, all of the lists of shows that didn't make it. How are you going to possibly make it?" In so many ways, that's what they were saying. And I
mhm,
said to her something I'd said many times to myself. My grandfather was born in 1901. He could not read. But every
mm,
person who met him called him Mr. Mitchell. He raised
mhm,
his 10 children. After my grandmother passed away, my mother was only 10 years old. He raised all 10 of his children. He would leave his, what we call a shotgun shack in the South, this little house. He would put on his suit, he would put on his hat, he would get in his car, and he would go to his church. And he was as elegant as any person who's ever walked into a palace because he
mhm,
carried himself in such a dignified way. He
mhm,
faced odds that are unimaginable. He's a sharecropper. He had to leave school in the second grade and worked at the back of a grocery store as the pit master and walked every day of his life with dignity. So for me, the ups and downs that I experience, and I don't mean
mhm,
this as an all shuck self deprecating, I look at that and I'm like, wait, this is nothing. My
mhm,
mother was a 19-year-old single mom. She came home from the hospital with me and her. And
Yep.
because of her, I am here. And so on my most challenging days, even as a mom, I look around and I'm like, wait a minute, this scared kid left this hospital alone with her baby and mustered the confidence and the resilience, not only for herself, who later she became a teacher, but for me. So that's my balance. I really, my husband will even tell you, I rarely even yell. It's contrary to what
Mhm.
people might think. I'm intense. I'm purposeful. I am intentional. I am about my business because I want the show to succeed and I want the people who work on the show to succeed and I want my family to succeed. But my husband,
Mhm.
if I were out of this room right now and you said, you have to take a truth serum and tell me how many times in the 10 years you've been together, I don't even yell. My team will take, but I'm very impactful in my presentation of my words because of my grandfather, my mother. Those people went through some things.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it gives me perspective.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I feel like, when you have confidence and you're sure of who you are, where you come from, it's much easier to um, see beyond what's happening right in front
Yeah.
of you and gain perspective. And I feel like when you're around people who have so much wisdom, like your father and your grandfather and your mother, you're able to see kind of a bird's eye view through their lens
Mhm.
into your own life,
Yeah.
and knowing that there's a future,
Mhm.
and things can turn around and
And that's what
shift.
I
I
hope to
think.
give my son. I mean, listen, I wrote my first children's book. I could have written about 5 million topics, but I really wanted to write about how to face fear, how to face those things that make us afraid. That is a common
Mhm.
thread. As
Mhm.
outgoing as I am on my show, if you saw me at a party, I am in the corner holding one person hostage and talking to that person. I've never been a social butterfly. I have a friend, we were at a birthday party last year, in fact, and my friend, I just got off the phone. We were laughing about something. And it was, I don't know, it was like 2 hours into the party. And she turned to me, she goes, "You still here?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "I've never seen you stay anywhere." I love the Kendrick Lamar song. He's like, "You've been happy when I was inside because now I'm outside." Like I am that person. I am inside. I love cooking. I love, entertaining at my house. You could probably give me the best restaurant reservation in the world. I like being in my safe space where we can laugh as loud as we want, drink as much as we want, talk and just really be authentic. And I got to your point. I love how you said the bird's eye view of what a good life is from
Mhm.
my family. And that's how a
Mhm.
good life was defined in my family. And thus I want my son to receive and accept a part of that for his journey as well. That in facing fears and facing uncertainty, it's how you define a good life that often gets you through those things.
Well, speaking of, I think this is a good kind of segue into Harlem Honey.
Mhm.
And let me say the full name because I want to
That's
make
okay.
sure. The Adventures of a Curious Kid,
Yes.
because that's what we're here to chat about. Considering the state of the world, and you were talking about, where you find your value. And I want to know how you feel that the book will help kids
Mhm.
understand the importance of where they come from and their
Mhm.
neighborhoods and their homes and the people they choose to
Yeah.
surround themselves with.
Well, your first exposure to life outside of the walls of your home is your neighborhood. It
Mhm.
is walking out the door. I can tell you my very first neighbors. I can tell you our first address. That was the beginning of my journey outside of my home. Before you even go to school, before you go to preschool, daycare, you walk out your door and someone lives this
Mhm.
way, this way, this way, or this way, depending on where you live. And for
Mhm.
me, the setting of the book, the character Moses, named after my son, leaves Texas, a very safe environment, a familiar environment, and he goes to New York, this big, bustling city. When I left Texas, I went 1,528 miles from my parents' door to Temple University. I am 54. I remember that number because it was a
Wow.
big change in my life. It was a big
Mhm.
moment in my life. And I felt, and your mom, you understand, there were so many things about parenting. I've been morning TV for 30 years. I probably interviewed everyone who's ever written a book. But until you are on the team, you do not know how to shoot the hoop. And so I'm now on the team, right? And I got the ball, this kid. And when the pandemic started and his world is big, cousins, aunts, friends, everybody's in our world, everybody's coming over. Then the shutdown happened. One thing that a lot of people don't know is I had to stay closed in for a longer period of time because I'm a single hosted show. And if I
Mhm.
become ill, the show would have not been on. And I had
Mhm.
to stay a little closed in. So did my son as a result, my husband. We started going out. My kid is kind of shy. At home, he is like, pop, pop, pop. He's got everything to say. And he would hide behind me. And
Mhm.
I know how people instantly have a knee jerk reaction to shyness or fearful kids, right? Get out there. What are you scared of? Come on up there. And
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
can make a shy person even more reserved.
Mhm.
And we started to explore our neighborhood. One of my most amazing memories of really acknowledging the shyness and trying to navigate the conversation. We were living in Harlem, and my son is walking down the street, and we're just walking our block. And every house has, we live in a townhouse, so every house had the address. And he was so enamored with the fact that everyone had their own address. And he's like saying the numbers out loud. And, this is numbers, this is awareness, this is all of these things. It started right there in our neighborhood, the opening up of the
Right.
world. And so I wanted to expand the conversation of big emotions, big feelings. We talk a lot about, and this saying, you know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, people would say, big boys don't cry, big girls don't cry, you're a big kid, don't cry. Now
Mhm.
we recognize how detrimental that language is. And
Mhm.
emotions and social and emotional development is as important as learning your ABCs and one, two, threes. And so for me, expanding the conversation from tears to fear, which is a hard
Mhm.
thing because you don't want to be afraid. You don't want your child to be afraid, but it's all natural for us to
Right.
experience, to be afraid of something. And so for me, the curious adventures of this kid talks about how do you ease fears, curiosity, because if you can
Mhm.
become curious about something, you may ask a question that opens up dialogue or opens up this new world. Food. We travel to a restaurant in the book because food is a common thread. I ask you, what's your mom or grandmom's favorite recipe? We're going to start talking. Oh, she used to make this or he used to make that.
Yep.
Music. If I say, what's on your playlist right now? We're going to get into a conversation. So I tried through the book, through the lens of this little character and his friends, open up his world and allow adults in the lives of children to think of ways to open up the world and
Mhm.
reduce the fear that is natural.
That is so interesting because I feel like before you have kids, you're absolutely right. You don't think about a lot of these things. And then having kids during COVID, during that time, I had that same moment,
Right.
that aha moment that my kids need to go outside. They don't know how to go to a restaurant. They're
Right.
so used to eating at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And then when we go to the restaurant and they're acting all crazy and they have a lot of questions
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just, they are curious, and fortunately, they have their little support
Yeah.
system and besties that
Yeah.
kind of help put them out of their shells. But at the same time, there is differences in their personalities that I had to learn to accept,
Yeah.
because when you're talking about a shy kid or a quiet kid, I was doing some work with a parenting coach called Mr. Chaz,
Mm.
and he was explaining that, even though a kid is quiet, our society wants the kid to go out of their shells. It's like you said, it's an old way of trying to encourage and push our kids to be something that's maybe a little more socially
Yeah.
or acceptable. But really, a quiet kid is potentially an observant kid who's learning by watching and
Yeah.
listening and hearing. And what it sounds like is he's a lot like you,
Yeah.
because you're the same quiet person in the corner and when you're outside, right? Who's
Yeah.
watching and listening and observing. But in our current society, we do kind of value that outgoing personality, the person who's just going to jump in
Yeah.
there. So I will just say I appreciate that about both you and Moses, because
Oh,
I am
thank you.
also one of those people, and I share a child who's like that. Um, this is very cool. And I think that just the idea of community and promoting the idea of togetherness and finding the commonalities through the foods and through the fact that we all have addresses and just helping children to see the world through the lens of through small things, but it's such a bigger purpose and that have so much more meaning.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. And I guess I want to ask you how this experience has been different than some of your other books, because your books are very different than this one.
It's so funny. They are obviously very different, but they all come from a real authentic place. When I created Jordan Manning, this crime solving, protagonist, this was a part of my journey as a journalist. It was also a deep desire. And at the time when I pitched that book, people were like, no, what about a beauty book? What about a memoir? What about everything but a crime series? So I'm just by nature a disruptive person. I like to do things that are unexpected. So that's authentic to me. And I really had a great time as a kid reading my Nancy Drew novels and my little crime series. So I thought, this is authentic to me. So that series was born. I wrote it and started it in the pandemic. I kept it going and was so honored that, my first foray into writing, people received it well. The cookbook, I moved to New York in 2008. My father was the best cook in the world. I was raised by my stepfather, who's the father that God meant for me to have. Great cook. I knew I would miss many things about him when he passed away suddenly. His cooking just, I'll start crying and think about just what an absence, coming home and visiting home. And I become so used to my dad having 3 and 4 things cooked and ready and a pie and this and that. And I come home and our house is quiet. It's empty. My mother, who's not a great cook, and she'd be the first to admit it, that's why she fell in love with my father, is there. And this huge character in our lives, right, is gone, and his meals. And so I started out on this journey of saying, I want to learn to cook because I came home the first Christmas without my father, and my mom was there. We had no holiday festivity, nothing planned. My father's favorite holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. My mom had nothing prepared. And I vowed on that day, after a friend gave me advice, create new traditions. I said, okay. So my mother loves the casino and I love the beach. So I said, we're going to go where there's a beach and a casino. That's how we're going to start our new tradition, Christmas. So we started going away for Christmas, which we'd never done. Because my dad, he won every little neighborhood Christmas contest. My dad would, the cook-off and the decor. Our house was the one that would light the whole street up because my dad was in the military. He took honor in being precise about things. And our house had the perfect lights with the perfect tree. And all of a sudden, this perfection was gone. And so we went on this journey of rediscovering, what life was going to be like and what it could be like without my father. And at some point I said, you know what? I want to learn to cook. My goal is to learn to cook in the first year, right? So my friend happens to be a James Beard Award-winning culinary producer. And we started, right? Can't go wrong with that. And we started on this journey through text message. I'd say, Lish, what should I cook tonight? And she'd say, oh, well, what do you have? And I'm like, let me walk to the grocery store. And so over the years, as the book is titled, A Confident Cook, that became my book. And now, to your point, reading all of these books about raising a child or being a parent, now I'm actually a parent. And there are things that even if I read it, I forgot. Because when it's in real time, you don't know what to do. You're trying to recall what somebody told you. And I'm on Google in the middle of the night while my husband's sleeping. And I'm like, how can you sleep during this? I'm trying to figure this out. And when my son, showed this really shy and reserved side, to your point, I didn't want him to feel bad about his natural personality. I also wanted to be the first person to root him on and support the personality that he has, right? And I love how you talked about the observer. One of the things that I noticed with my son, we would go out and he would be very quiet or kind of reserved and cautious and come home and he could tell you everything somebody had on. He could tell you everything someone said. He could tell you everything. And I was like, okay, he's taking it in the way he can take it in. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. And so we
Yep.
began to champion him. I'll tell you one day, and I've never told anyone this because I'm very, very sensitive about what I share about my son because it's his life to share. But I will tell you,
Mm-hmm.
we went to a birthday party once, and my son was terrified to go in. And I've shared that part of the story. What I didn't share ever before was he said, "Can I turn my back and walk in backwards?"
Mm.
I burst into tears inside, like,
Oh.
because you want your kid to come, look, I'm Tamron Hall, we're gonna walk in here, we're brave, and
Mm-hmm.
I kept
Mm-hmm.
the whole car right there. I was like, "You've got this, we're gonna walk in the party, it's gonna be great. And it's your friends are waiting." And he said he was excited. The minute we got out of the car, got closer to the door, he was like, "Mm." And he could see his friends and he wanted to go in, but he had an
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming sense of doubt, I guess it would be, that he could go
Mm-hmm.
in, and I don't know. I wish I could understand it. And he said, "Can I turn around and walk in without facing it?"
Mm-hmm.
My whole life, I just thought, okay, great. People are going, "Why is he walking?" And I said, "Yes, you can. You sure can.
Yes. Yes.
You sure can." And I said, "Do you want me to walk backwards?" Or he goes, "No, because you need to see so we don't bump into anything." I said, "Okay.
Practical.
Okay."
Yes.
And then I said, "Okay." So he walked, and we walked the 3 steps it took to get. It was in one of those big gym play things. It was already overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
People jumping and I walk in, he reverse in, sat on the bench. You got to take your shoes off. When I tell you I couldn't get the kid out of the party, like it was time to go.
Yes.
And I'm like, "It's time to go." And he and his friends are now jumping and running. He just needed that little beat to collect himself.
Mm-hmm. And he needed you
Yes.
to be his comfort
Yes.
and make sure he knows that, yeah, if you want to walk into this party
Yeah.
backwards, then let's make it happen. And
Exactly.
I want to say, like, just from my own personal experience, there have been many times where I wanted to sneak into a party and sneak out. So
Right.
who knows that
Right.
that feeling will ever change
Right.
for him. But I really love that's a wonderful story. Thanks for sharing it because it is definitely something that I have also had to learn to
Yeah.
overcome with my kids. And I will tell you, I don't know how old your
He's
son
5
is.
now, and that happened when he was 3. He's 5 now.
Okay. So I have 2 girls, they're 6. And the one that is makes me a little nervous is that observer. That observer, you got to be careful around the observer because she knows everything
Yeah.
and she gives it back to me and tells my husband and I all the things that she's heard and learned. And there's no rebuttal. I
Yeah.
just look at my husband and I'm like, "Ooh, she's kind of right."
Well, she's right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I love
yeah,
that.
so it's so funny and, like, just embracing those different personalities and just giving them that confidence, and
Yeah.
I feel like it's so interesting your book is titled Cooking with Confidence,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. A confident cook. Yes, a
A
confident cook.
confident cook,
Uh-huh.
and for children also, I'm wondering if you guys are able to cook together
Oh
because that's
gosh.
one of the things that, we partner with Little Kitchen Academy
Yeah.
for our foundation because cooking with children is one of the biggest confidence builders that they can kind of, engage
Yeah.
in that helps to really give them like the tools that they need to ask for what they need to learn about all the different materials and things in the kitchen and what it does for their personality,
Yeah.
their sense of self, and their ability to like accomplish this thing and make these meals, these things that grown-ups are doing.
Yeah.
I feel like is huge.
We
So is that
do. Yeah,
something
we
you
go,
guys
yes.
do?
And like you, I've partnered with Common Threads for many, many years, a great organization that teaches, food is a common thread. If you want to learn about someone, you want to learn something, introduce culture through food. And yet my son, listen, he makes a guacamole that he is so proud of. I'm telling you, he puts his lime in it. He says a little pinch of salt. He loves cooking. We very early on, I bought one of those cooking towers. We didn't have this when I was a little kid. My mom was like, "Stand on the bar stool." Now they have much
Yep.
safer things, and it's like a kitchen cookie. You can get them anywhere. And he would stand in the little tower in the kitchen, and he cooked.
Mhm.
I bought him the little plastic knives, and he would cut the sandwich, mixing all of those things
Mhm.
from day one. We had him in the kitchen. I had him in the kitchen. Really, for sensory, it's great sensory. It's great to taste and smell. And I'll tell you, a huge wake up call for me. As much as he was cooking, I amped it up a lot more. My son used to have those yogurt pouch things, because we're on the go.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
yogurt pouch. So one day it was a weekend, so we're not on the go. We're chilling out, and I put yogurt in the bowl. I give him the bowl and he says, I'm not eating that. What is that? And I said, it's yogurt. He goes, no, it's not. And I said, yeah, it's yogurt. It's yogurt. He's like, that's not yogurt because he'd never seen yogurt. His yogurt
Mhm.
was always it pouched him out. And
Wow.
again, you don't know until you're actually on the field, on the court playing that sport. Now I'm in the parent game and I'm like, wait, what? What have I done? My child doesn't know what yogurt looks like. So I was like, okay, well, that's a wrap. I stopped buying pouch yogurt. We scoop the yogurt out
Ooh.
of the thing. He sprinkles
Mhm.
his own granola on, but I we always had him in the kitchen, but that took it to a whole nother level for me. So I stopped buying things that, like, when he drinks milk, he pours his milk out himself. We have a very intimate relationship with our food, so much so. Uh we fish, we have a house and we go out fishing. And I took him out to fish last summer. I wasn't ready when he was a little younger because I'm like, he is too jumpity jump. We need to make sure he's steady. So we go fishing.
Mhm.
We fish. We clean the fish on the boat. We scale the fish. We gut the fish. We take the fish home.
Wow.
We fried the fish. We ate the fish. And it is one of his favorite stories. He's like, Mom, remember we got that fish? We cooked that fish. I'm like, okay, I don't know if everybody's
Was there ever a transition for you when he learned that the cute little fishies or the cute little chickens actually were the things that he was eating?
It's so funny that I think that's what happened. Like because we don't have any chickens running around. So the distance between the chicken on the plate is far enough. But the
Little
fish,
chicken breast
oh
versus
my
an
God.
actual chicken?
Yes, yes. So, but the fish, we are like scaling. And there was a brief moment where I thought, is this too soon to introduce that Nemo can end up this way? So I was like, oh no. But I wanted him to see. But yeah, and he
Yes.
loves telling that story. He's like, yeah, we got that fish and my mom skinned it and she cooked it. And then he ends the cooked it part on such a dramatic note. And I'm like, we did.
What
We
about the eat it? The eat it. My kids
oh
are like, forget the cooking. We ate it.
Oh yeah, no, he tore those fish sticks up, and we don't, and even in our house, like I cook whole fish, like one of the recipes in my cookbook. I love whole fish. We travel a lot to Caribbean, but as I said, I grew up in Texas, so my relationship with my food, while I wasn't a great cook until I went on this journey, I ate everything, and my son, even now, his favorite thing to eat every day if he could is curry chicken and dumplings. He does.
Ugh.
It's so funny. He doesn't like cake. He doesn't like and this is not by I have candy all around my house. He's like not
He's
interested.
a savory. He's like, I'm into savory. I'm not
He's a
into
savory
sweets.
guy. He's a savory guy. That's all he
Love
wants.
it.
He wants nothing to do with sweets. His birthday's coming up. And he said, he wants a cake. He just wants vanilla. But because everyone doesn't like vanilla, he wants him to get additional chocolate cupcakes for his friends. I'm like, okay, you're
Mm.
getting way too specific with your needs. It
He's
was
planning his menus out. Like for his all of his birthdays, he's gonna be in charge of the
yeah.
menu for all of his birthdays moving forward.
It's totally, and it's such a remarkable thing again to see this kid who, over the course of I would say now 2 years now because he's 5, he's in kindergarten. He's like, I went to pick him up recently. His teacher said, "Oh, he loves to dance. He's the life of the party." And I'm like, really?
Really?
Yeah, he's really come out. He's got to play this in a month, and they gave them their script. It's the book. The Day the Crayons Quit. It's a cute little book, and he's orange crayon number 3.
Okay.
He is owning it. He's like, Mom, I need to look at my lines. And so we've kept the script on the table in the mornings, and he reads his lines. So I went up to his school the other day. It was the end of Black History Month, and they asked me to come up and read a story for the kids. And I went and I said, how's rehearsal going? And they're like, oh. He's great. I was like, wait, what? He's like, he's on there. He's on fire. So yeah, he's Mr.
I
Orange
love
Crayon
that.
number 3. And they had their Christmas holiday pageant. And so his school is K through 12, and they paired each kid with a 12th grade buddy. And
Mm.
Moses and his 12th grade buddy led the procession through the church with the candle. And he was the first one. I didn't even, I want to tell you, I didn't even get it on tape because I wasn't prepared for my kid to be the first one. And
Oh.
I have my camera and I'm getting ready to get to the thing. And then my husband goes, there he is. I'm like, wait, there he is, there he is, And we and he walked out, got in his fight. But I'd like to believe, I want to believe and own that it was a collaboration between the two of us. He
Mhm.
was able to feel safe to express his fears, and
Mhm.
I, through the knowledge of great moms in my family circle and my friend circle and guests that have come on the show, part of the community is saying, hey, I don't know how to handle this. And I was able to speak up and express it to friends who are in child development,
Mhm.
people who have children, because when you have kids, you are in child development too. You may not have the
Absolutely.
letters behind the name, but you are. And I was able to really look at the situation and, as you said so beautifully, see my child, not someone else's child, parent the child
Mhm.
that I have. And so
Mhm.
that's a little bit of this story. That's why I was on the fence about naming the character Moses, but this was such an intimate part of our journey. But at the
Yeah.
same time, one that so many parents, there's not a parent that I've spoken with that doesn't have a child or say they were this child. And that's
Mhm.
why it's great.
Well, I, for one, I can't wait to read the story to my girls and my son.
Thank you.
And I feel like I just want to know, I guess, ask you one more question
Of
before
course.
we pop into our last little segment, because this has been such a fun
Yeah.
catch up. I feel like we can talk about our kids forever. They're so fun and they add so much joy and entertainment to our lives.
Yes, they do. They do.
um, so if your son were looking back on your journey years down the line, what is the one thing that you would hope that he would take away from it?
That I was happy,
Oh,
because people talk a lot about how resilient I am, and I receive it, and it means the world to me. Um, Starting the show, or starting out, restarting my life in my late 40s, career wise, or having my son. It's so often our children see us as being so strong. Where I saw my mom, I never really saw my mom cry, and then she would talk to me about her prayer closet. As I got older,
mhm,
I understood, and understand so much more about my mom, because we talk. She's my mom, but we talk as friends so often.
mhm,
But
mhm.
I wanted to know I was happy, because people will say, oh, your mom did this, or she had a talk show, or she had... but I want him to say, my mom had the loudest laugh.
Mhm.
My mom recently, we were watching the Luther Vandross documentary, and it was so good. And I saw my son, like, he only listened to Kids Bop, but all of a sudden, Luther, I can't love myself. I don't want nobody else to ever love me. And my
Yes.
son is like, and then I went, Alexa, play the best of Luther Vandross. And we're like dancing, because I want him to dance. I do dinner parties because my favorite memories, my father and mom played dominoes, which I can't play. Believe it or not, my 5-year-old has learned to play from my mother. So I have a 5-year-old who can play dominoes. But my parents would go, and it wasn't a fancy party. It wasn't decadent. It was just them and their friends. They might watch a fight or a game or a movie, and everybody was at our house just having a good time. And as a result, I make sure we have, parties, intimate ones at our house. And they're not, it's just everybody's coming as they are. But I want him to
Yes.
see that we had a community, that we
Yep.
had friends, but that his mom was happy.
Yes. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That was so lovely. It's been so wonderful catching
Thank
up with
you.
you and talking about your new book, Harlem Honey, which I love the name. I'm not a New Yorker. I don't know a ton about
Well, you
Harlem and
will,
all.
because at the book, it's like a little map and it takes you through. And the goal is for
I
the,
need to take my
yes,
kids. They are
yes, you
asking me
got
to
it.
go to New York. My girls have never been. My
Oh,
son has
come
been,
on.
so he holds it over their heads.
You got to
We're
go
going
see
to
The
read your
Lion
book.
King, go to Harlem. At the back
Yes.
of the book, we have a little description of things you should see in Harlem. And the goal is for this
Wow.
character to travel around the country. This is the beginning of the journey, kind of like Dora the Explorer, but in a real world. So we may
Mm-hmm.
be wherever and create a book from that travel as well. But I hope the kids enjoy it. And thank you again
Yeah.
for coming on my show. I'd love to see you again. We always need to surround ourselves with good people and good conversation.
Yes, I agree. Speaking of,
Yes.
one last thing, and we're
Yes.
going to do our little Harlem crawl with the
Okay.
kids.
Okay. Okay.
But before you go, we play a card game. I have a conversation card game called Do
Yes.
Tell. And I'm going to have you choose one
Okay.
card
Okay.
to answer, and you cannot see them or physically choose yourself. So you
Okay.
have to tell me which one.
The blue in the
The blue
middle.
one. Okay,
Yes.
so the blue one is the Spice Things Up deck, but
Uh-oh.
it's okay.
I'm fine.
It's not super spicy.
I'm not worried.
Okay. Good. Okay. What is one thing that regularly keeps you up at night?
Oh my gosh. One thing that
See, look
regularly keeps me up at night. My desire to binge watch every show. Currently, Paradise.
Ooh,
I mean, that's my TV time. So I
yes.
wake up and all of a sudden I slip into the guest room and my husband's like, "What are you doing? You're binge watching." That is one thing. Unfortunately, I just binge watched Paradise. I just did the episode of the Kardashians. I don't even know why. I TV keeps me up at night. I'm going to finish White Lotus. I got to catch up on that.
Ooh, me
And Yellow
too.
Jackets. No, I have an unhealthy addiction to binge watching TV, and it regularly disrupts my happy home. Where my
You
husband
know
said to me,
what?
"Are
We'll
you
call
going to
it
sleep?"
research.
Research.
Just call it research and it's fine.
Yes, my husband said to me, "You can't keep falling asleep in the guest room." I was like, "Okay, okay, okay, okay."
Yeah. Research, but go back to bed. This has been wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank
And
you.
Harlem Honey is out March 25th.
Yes, you can pre-order
But
it whenever.
pre-order
Yeah,
now.
pre-order it
Link is
now.
in the description.
Yes, pre-order now. We're going on tour. We'll be in Chicago, in Houston, in New York, of course, in New Orleans. And I hope that if you're listening, if you're in town, come and see me. Get a hug. Get a little Harlem Honey hug.
Yeah, go visit. Okay.
Thank you for watching the Do Tell Relationship Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this episode and leave us a comment as well. And lastly, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at the dotellpodcast@gmail.com or DM us at BeneXNina on Instagram. See you next week with another exciting guest.